Today's focus is on a song that does not demand attention, but slowly draws it toward itself, written by an artist who profoundly reshaped the musical landscape, not through volume or bravado, but through nuance, movement, and freedom. Joni Mitchell never needed grand gestures to open new paths. In Refuge of the Roads, the closing track on her Hejira album, her way of writing, thinking, and traveling converges in a song that is as open as it is elusive. It is a piece that does not ask for quick conclusions, but for attention and time. Hello, and welcome to a brand new episode of We're Only in It for the Music, a YouTube series that takes you through the musical universe, from ABBA to Zappa and everything in between and beyond. Click the like and subscribe buttons, and hit the notification bell so you'll never miss an episode. But enough of that, never mind the bollocks. We're only in it for the music. Within Joni Mitchell's body of work, there are countless songs that lend themselves to discussion or a song review. Many of them are better known and have long since established themselves as audience favorites. Still, I keep returning to Refuge of the Roads. Not because it is the most obvious choice, but because it reveals itself differently with every listen. It is a song that truly begins to speak when placed within the moment in which it was written and within the album it belongs to. This year marks the 50th anniversary of Hejira, and there have also been renewed discussions about a biopic in which Meryl Streep is set to portray Joni Mitchell. Against that backdrop, Refuge of the Roads feels like a natural point of departure and a perfect candidate for a song review. When Hejira was released in 1976, Joni Mitchell had already put out 7 albums. It was the result of a development that had unfolded over several records. 2 years earlier, Mitchell had already signaled a clear shift in direction with Court and Spark. The sparse folk tradition of her early work gave way to a richer sonic palette, in which jazz influences began to play an increasingly prominent role. Despite that expansion, Court and Spark remained accessible, carried by her unmistakable sense of melody and form. Its follow-up, The Hissing of Summer Lawns, largely set that accessibility aside. The album explores the rougher edges of her songwriting and presents an artist largely unconcerned with expectations. For part of her audience, this proved to be a bridge too far. The music became more complex, the structures looser, the themes less clearly defined. Not everyone was willing to follow that movement. Against that backdrop, Hejira was received as a kind of exhalation, not because Mitchell returned to her point of origin, but because the album found a new balance. The music is freer and more open than her early folk records, yet at the same time it breathes calm and coherence. Hejira is an album that moves without pushing, one that lends itself perfectly to long stretches of travel, a record that does not ask for focus, but for being on the road. That sense of movement and reflection comes together in the closing track, Refuge of the Roads. As the album's final song, it does not feel like a conclusion, but like an open ending. Mitchell once remarked that much of her work could just as easily have been written by other musicians. That is hardly true of the songs on Hejira. This is material inseparable from her way of thinking, writing, and seeing the world. Refuge of the Roads is the most pronounced example of that, a song that unfolds as a stream of consciousness, a chain of thoughts, memories, and observations, carried by a musical structure that creates space rather than imposing direction. The elastic bass playing of Jaco Pastorius and the jazz-inflected chords of Mitchell's idiosyncratic guitar work form the perfect musical setting for a road trip through her psyche. Refuge of the Roads grew out of a brief but pivotal detour. On her way back to Los Angeles, Joni Mitchell spent 3 days in Colorado visiting the controversial Buddhist meditation teacher Chogyam Trungpa. It was during that stay, in early 1976, that Mitchell later said Trungpa helped her break her cocaine addiction. What followed was a period she described as an awakened state that lasted several days, a rare stretch of clarity in which her usual self-consciousness seemed to fall away. She spoke of it as a return to something primal and unguarded. No sense of self, no self-consciousness. My mind was back in Eden, the mind before the fall. That sense of mental openness, of awareness without analysis, runs quietly through the song. Mitchell would later describe Refuge of the Roads as one of her favorite compositions. Years after its original release, she returned to it once more, re-recording the song alongside Amelia and Hejira with full orchestral arrangements for her 2002 album Travelogue. The song also gestures outward, beyond the personal, through a reference to the Apollo 8 photograph Earthrise. The image of the Earth seen rising above the moon, a reminder of distance and perspective, mirroring the way the song balances intimate experience with a wider, almost cosmic view. In the next chapter, we will look at how that freedom takes shape in words, and how, in Refuge of the Roads, Mitchell describes a journey that moves not only along highways, but through the mind of the narrator. Joni Mitchell never lies. The song does not open with a place, but with an encounter. The narrator meets a friend of spirit, a figure who is both drunk and wise at the same time. That combination is crucial. He exists outside conventional order, and it is precisely from that position that his insight emerges. He does not function as a mentor in the traditional sense, but as a mirror, or even a spiritual guide. What matters is that he neither corrects her nor analyzes her. Instead, he mirrored me back, simplified. What feels complex and heavy in her mind is returned to her in a distilled form. This does not lead to catharsis, but to shared irony. They laugh at the idea of perfection, knowing it will always remain out of reach. The key line, heart and humor and humility, introduces the moral compass of the song. Not a solution, not a destination, but an attitude. The encounter does not end with a conclusion, but with a direction. He does not send her home, but to the refuge of the roads. Here, the road is introduced for the first time as a place of refuge rather than escape. In the second verse, the setting shifts from an individual conversation to a temporary community. The narrator falls in with drifters, people without a fixed place or clear social standing. The imagery is fragmentary and concrete. A beach town, a grocery store, small acts of theft, cast-off clothes. What stands out is the domestic gesture within this context. She cooks dinner for them. This moment introduces warmth and care, without romanticizing the situation. The affection she later feels does not arise from anything grand, but from banality. The reference to overflowing nets in the Gulf of Mexico sets scarcity against abundance. While their existence is fragile, the world around them appears rich and generous. Once again, the road functions as a connecting element. It is the space where temporary forms of belonging can emerge, without any promise of continuity. This verse marks an internal shift. Up to this point, a sense of lightness prevails, but it disappears the moment the narrator begins to analyze. Analysis is not presented here as insight, but as a burden. Thinking introduces judgment, and that judgment casts a shadow over her gaze. The thunderhead of judgment is a powerful image, something that slowly gathers, becomes visible, and generates tension, not only for the narrator herself, but for others as well. People grow nervous and withdraw. What she sees, or believes she sees, is not welcome. The road remains present, but its function changes. Where it once offered space for encounter, it now becomes a place where distance emerges. The refuge is still there, but it is no longer naturally shared. Here, the narrator retreats into nature. The forest is not an idyllic landscape, but a space for reset. Sounds and movements, crickets, the turning wheel of fortune, suggest cycles and inevitability. Physical action takes over, running. Not towards something, but away from something, to lose the blues. The comparison to an animal emphasizes instinct over reflection. This is not self-analysis, but bodily release. The reference to Michelangelo's clouds and gods introduces an unexpected cultural register. The sublime is not set against the earthly here, but interwoven with it. Taking refuge in the ruins suggests that even grandeur is subject to decay, and that it is precisely there that comfort can be found. The final verse shifts to an apparently mundane location, a highway service station. But hanging there is a photograph of the Earth seen from space. The perspective becomes literally cosmic. What stands out is what cannot be seen from that distance. Cities, forests, roads, and ultimately, the narrator herself. Her personal baggage, fatigue, and movement dissolve into abstraction. The universe does not know her, yet the song does not end in nihilism. She is westbound and rolling. The motion and the journey continues. The road remains the place she inhabits, not as an answer, but as a condition. The refuge is not that the burden disappears, but that it is carried as she keeps moving. Across the verses, the meaning of the roads shifts from mirror and direction to community to rupture through judgment to instinct and escape, and finally to perspective and relativization. The road is not a solution, but a continuum in which thinking, feeling, and movement alternate. There are songs that persuade through their story, and songs that persuade through their form. Refuge of the Roads does something else entirely. It convinces because form, perspective, and language fully converge with the person who wrote it. This is not a song that can be separated from its maker, not because others would lack the technical ability, but because the underlying consciousness is inseparable from that of Joni Mitchell. Many singer-songwriters write in the first person, but often that voice is a constructed self, a role, a narrator, a fictionalized version of the author. In Refuge of the Roads, that distance is almost entirely absent. The voice in the song is not concerned with self-presentation, emotional effect, or narrative closure. She observes while moving. That makes the text vulnerable in a way that is difficult to imitate. There is no clear moral, no completed character arc. The narrator continuously shifts position: student, guest, outsider, judge, fugitive, traveler. That constant movement requires a writer who dares to be inconsistent. What makes this song exceptional is that thinking itself becomes a thematic element. In the third verse, analysis is explicitly identified as a fault line. The moment she begins to interpret, distance, judgment, and discomfort emerge. This is a rare moment of self-awareness in songwriting. Many songs present reflection as growth. Here, reflection becomes problematic. That requires a writer who neither parades her intellect nor suppresses it, and who dares to show how sharpness of mind can lead to alienation. That tension between insight and isolation is characteristic of Mitchell's work, but here it surfaces unfiltered. The lyrics do not follow a classical narrative arc. Places, people, and images are not introduced or resolved, but encountered. Coherence emerges not through plot, but through movement and repetition. The recurring line, "The refuge of the roads," does not function as a traditional refrain, but as a mental point of return. This mode of writing, associative, open, fragmentary, demands deep trust in language and timing. It is poetry that refuses to explain itself. Many songwriters would instinctively want to impose structure, clarity, or summary here. Mitchell consciously resists that impulse, making her writing much more free of form. Equally striking is what the text does not do. There is little sentimentality, no explicit emotional release, no closing wisdom. Even in moments of affection or melancholy, the tone remains observational. That does not make the song cold, but precise. The feeling does not reside in the phrasing itself, but in the space between the images. It is a style that brushes up against literature, yet continues to function entirely within a musical form. Finally, there is the central image, the road. In many songs, the road symbolizes freedom, escape, or romance. Here, the road is not a metaphor with a single meaning, but a condition in which everything can exist without needing resolution. Encounter, judgment, flight, and perspective alternate, yet no endpoint is ever suggested. That idea, that movement itself is sufficient, aligns seamlessly with Mitchell's work and outlook during this period. Not as a biographical fact, but as a worldview. The song does not sound as though it was written about being on the road, but while being on the road. Refuge of the Roads is not a song that wants to impress. It wants to exist. That is precisely why it could not have been written by anyone else. Not because others would fail to find the words, but because very few songwriters dare to take so little distance from their own thinking, doubt, and motion. In Refuge of the Roads, the music does not serve a story, but a state of consciousness. That distinction is crucial. The musical choices are not illustrative, but facilitative. They allow the text to unfold without being steered. It is precisely in this that the strength of the interaction between music and words lies. The composition avoids a classical build. There is no clear climax, no harmonic release, no moment where everything lands. Instead, the song moves within a cyclical structure. The chords return without emphasis, as if they are continually starting again from where they have just been. That circular motion aligns seamlessly with the text, which likewise resists linear development. The narrator moves from encounter to community, from insight to doubt, from nature to cosmic perspective, but never toward resolution. Music and lyrics thus share the same logic: progression without destination. Joni Mitchell's guitar playing does not function as a rhythmic foundation here, but as harmonic terrain. The chords remain open, allowing tension to exist and rarely resolving it fully. This does not create unrest, but space. That openness makes it possible for the words to move freely across the music. Mitchell does not have to force her phrasing into a rigid framework. On the contrary, the harmony seems to adapt to her timing, not the other way around. This is essential for a text so deeply rooted in observation and association. The fretless bass of Jaco Pastorius plays a subtle yet decisive role. It anchors the song without fixing it in place. His lines are fluid, at times almost melodic, but never dominant. Where the lyrics are fragmentary and the guitar remains open, the bass functions as a physical counterweight. It keeps the song connected to the ground while the words descend into memory, judgment, and perspective. That balance prevents the piece from becoming weightless. The music remains in motion, but never drifts away. One of the most striking aspects is Mitchell's approach to timing. She does not sing squarely on the beat, but alongside it. Lines begin where they want to begin and end when they are complete in meaning, not when the music expects them to. This aligns directly with the text, in which thinking and perception are primary. Thoughts arise, extend themselves, are interrupted. The music does not force those thoughts into a grid, but allows them to breathe. The result is a rare sense of naturalness. The song sounds not performed, but spoken. Just as important as what is played is what does not happen. There are no emphatic fills, no dramatic accents, no moments where the music comments on the text. That restraint amplifies the expressive power of the words. The silence and openness in the music mirror the mental space in which the lyrics unfold. Like the road itself, the musical framework is not a destination, but a passage. In Refuge of the Roads, music and lyrics carry each other not because they tell the same story, but because they allow the same conditions: openness, movement, and the absence of a harmonic resolution. The music offers no answer to the text, and the text demands no solution from the music. They exist alongside one another, on the road. Refuge of the Roads is not a song that asks to be interpreted, but one that asks to be inhabited. It does not invite conclusions, but movement, along a current of thought and feeling that never settles into a final destination. What makes the song remarkable is not a single image, musical gesture, or line of text, but the way everything remains in motion without coming apart. Throughout the song, Joni Mitchell refuses to organize her experiences into a finished narrative. Encounters are temporary, insights unstable, perspectives constantly shifting. The road does not function as a metaphor with a fixed meaning, but as a condition in which contradictions can coexist: closeness and distance, lightness and judgment, connection and solitude. Music and lyrics reinforce that premise by refusing to impose anything. The open harmony, circular structure, and free sense of timing create a space in which words do not have to fit, but are allowed to appear and disappear. The song moves, looks around, and keeps driving. Not because it has somewhere to go, but because standing still is not an option. Perhaps that is the core of Refuge of the Roads. Not that being on the road provides an answer, but that it is enough. In a world that constantly demands meaning, choice, and direction, Mitchell proposes something else: that there are moments when it is sufficient to keep moving, with heart, humor, and humility, and to accept the road itself as a temporary shelter, not as a solution, but as a way of being. And that was Joni Mitchell. That was Refuge of the Roads. What do you think of this Joni song? Let me know in the comments below this video. I'm always curious to hear your perspective. You can listen to Refuge of the Roads along with all the other music featured in this series in the Spotify playlist via the link in the description. Follow the social media pages on Facebook and Instagram for updates, because I will follow you if you follow me. And don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and hit that notification bell so you never miss an episode. Tell your friends about the channel. Why not? It's greatly appreciated. Thank you so much for watching. See you next time. And in the meantime, drop the needle, press play, and remember, we're only in it for the music.